This Ridley-O is brought to you by LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.
A couple of questions. 1. I wonder if the citations directed against, roughly 8 or 9 anti-lockdown activists could trigger a repeat of 2010. Or maybe we can call it the 2010 era. So if you think about the reason why there were so many conflicts between free staters and courts and police and everyone in the government, it seems like, in the 2010 era, it kind of stems from, well, just to take the example that I know best. I hate to talk about myself too much, but you talk about what you know. So there was a series of dramatic court incidents starting around 2009, maybe 2008, which led to sort of a lot of liberty activity, and also a lot of court activity and police activity. You could say that it really started, although it started before this, but it really, a huge escalatory mark was, I guess, in 2008 or 2009, where someone had reported a couch on Ian Freeman's property. He would have been known as Ian Bernard at the time, probably. He'd left a couch outside. So this triggered a series of interactions with bureaucrats, which eventually wound up with him in front of a judge. And again, this was no big deal. Hardly anyone was paying attention to it, except his audience. But he did videotape all his interactions with bureaucrats, and when he finally got in front of the judge, 2 key things happened. First, the judge, Edward Burke, I think his first name was Edward, Keene District Court, who had had a fair amount of experience with liberty activists, appearing before him, did something that he hadn't done before. He just sort of lost it. So when Ian Freeman tried to practice sort of these Mark Stevens techniques of asking questions of the government that the government doesn't want to answer, he was talking while standing. Of course, you're supposed to stand for judges, right? Well, the judge told him to sit down. And he was slow in doing it. It took him, maybe 10 seconds to do it instead of 5 or whatever. So the judge just lost his mind and said, "Have a seat." You've probably seen this video. "Have a seat. Take him into custody." And he was whisked off to jail. But lesser known, but just as important, as part of that hearing involved the court officials ordering all cameras to be turned off, and that created a string of follow-up incidents. So I had already been on a civil disobedience campaign type thingy, doing illegal puppet shows around the state. It was illegal, maybe it's still illegal, to do a puppet show for profit in New Hampshire without a license. So at each new event, I would do the puppet show at each event. No one ever seemed to want to arrest me for that, but I would add some new illegal act to the puppet show. So, it involved walking across the street, at certain points in time when I guess we weren't supposed to, putting like water in milk jugs. It's actually kind of embarrassing how many things are illegal in the free state, but eventually the one that got me arrested was making an issue out of Judge Burke's camera restrictions. So initially this took the form of going in there and doing camera panning without permission. So I wasn't supposed to. Burke was trying to keep people from panning the camera. So I would go in there and I would order, or I would announce that I was going to pan the camera whether I was allowed to or not. And he let me get away with that. I came back after they messed with Ian on this thing and ordered the cameras off. I came back and I just announced that I would film whether I was allowed, whether I was allowed to or not. I was going to film. So they stopped me in the court lobby and arrested me. This was video broadcast live, seized my camera and everything. And then that led to, I guess, what my arrests have usually led to, and that is other people going and doing the same thing and getting arrested for the same thing. I'm kind of honored about that. I haven't been that great about getting publicity for my civil disobedience, but on this cylinder, I think I've really hit. Like the idea of sort of inspiring other activists to do something similar. Because it was when I was arrested in 2006 for handing out flyers in the IRS office. Two other people went and got arrested for the same thing in protest. Lauren Canario and Kat Canning. And then later on, in this 2009 incident, what happened is Sam Dodson, a keen liberty activist, came and did basically the same thing about a month later. In fact, he was trying to come to my arraignment and film that, and he was filming in the court lobby. And when I popped out of the lobby for a sec to use the restroom, and I came back in, I heard screaming. He had been removed from the scene and was being dragged around. And I can't remember if it was that hearing or another one. I think it was the same hearing where I was there getting arraigned or whatnot by Judge Burke. I think they had to arrest 4 more people, and this was because they refused to leave the court lobby when told to. So that was captured on video. Them, carrying people out because they were refusing to walk out. It was fairly dramatic. And then I lose track of what happened after that. There was this slew of follow-up arrests that had to keep happening because there was just more and more contact between liberty activists and courts. And liberty activists don't always do what a court tells them. So anyway, I wonder if that's what's going to happen again. Something along these lines of all these arrests will result in all these different court appearances, and the court appearances will each one will become a new incident, right? A big incident or a small incident, I don't know which. That certainly is how it could play out. Having said that, I think it's been about a month now since the first series of arrests that happened at Governor Sununu's house at the protest, where these 8 or 9 activists were arrested or cited. Only one was arrested, I believe. A reporter was also cited from NH Journal. But the fact that we haven't heard a lot about these follow-up arraignments and court appearances and whatnot would be an indication that maybe this won't become a big thing like the camera bans in 2009 were. But you can certainly help me by keeping me up to date on what's going on with these court activities and this possibly initial series of citations and arrests. I can at least call talk radio about it. Probably, though not always in the most timely manner. First they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they attack you, then you win. So, by and large, I guess it will be better for liberty in New Hampshire and for the Free Staters if this becomes a thing. Like, an issue. A contested issue, like the camera bans were. Here's what looks like a post from Angela Lacey on Health Freedom NH Facebook group. She says, quote, "Are we being censored on our own pages now? This is my own personal page. I am the admin." Unquote. And then she quotes Facebook. Facebook says, quote, "Your post has been submitted and is pending approval by an admin." Unquote. She was the admin, she says. Here's an article excerpt from InsideSources.com, focused on New Hampshire. I'm not sure if it's in New Hampshire or not. Quote, "Why do Sununu and McDonald need to suspend constitutional rights?" January 14th, 2021, by Ian Hewitt. Quote, "At least on paper, Governor Chris Sununu is currently one of the most powerful executives in the United States. In litigation against the governor's COVID-19 orders, the New Hampshire Attorney General's office has successfully argued that, in a time of emergency, Sununu has the power to suspend civil liberties, including fundamental constitutional rights. Looking around New Hampshire, you might not guess that our constitutional rights have been suspended. The governor is not targeting churches, confiscating guns, or searching our homes without warrants. This does not mean that we have enforceable legal rights. Under the legal theory of our Attorney General's office, this only means that Governor Sununu has mercifully chosen not to deploy the full range of his powers. The next governor might not be so benevolent. This danger is of great concern to us at Cornerstone, as our vision is a New Hampshire where religious freedom flourishes. The idea that constitutional rights can be suspended in a time of emergency endangers not only religious freedom, but all the other freedoms enshrined by our state and federal constitutions. This issue is especially important now that New Hampshire's Attorney General, Gordon MacDonald, has just been renominated to the post of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New Hampshire. The architect of this suspend civil liberties theory appears to be MacDonald's subordinate, Solicitor General Daniel E. Will. MacDonald did not personally brief or argue these cases. Yet, the Solicitor General nonetheless made the argument for MacDonald's office, and under his authority, although it is possible, it seems unlikely that Will did so without MacDonald's approval or knowledge. One option for shoring up our constitutional rights against executive overreach is legislative action. As our state senators are standing firmly by the governor, however, our options for protecting our rights may be dwindling. If MacDonald were to rule from the bench that the governor can suspend constitutional rights, we could potentially find ourselves without any avenue short of a constitutional amendment for protecting our rights from sweeping emergency powers. Given the grave importance of the issue, citizens should call upon the Executive Council to question MacDonald about his views on the suspension of constitutional rights. Does MacDonald see constitutional rights as fixed, or does he believe they can be simply set aside by the exigencies of executive power? This does not mean asking MacDonald how he will decide some particular case. It simply means asking MacDonald to state that he will always apply the very rights that he will soon swear to uphold. And then later in the article, quote, "What does a suspension of constitutional rights really mean? It is important to clearly understand what the Attorney General's office and the Binford Court mean by suspend the constitutional rights. This phrase has two components, constitutional rights and suspend. Let's consider each one in turn. First, what kind of rights is the Binford Court talking about? Neither the Solicitor General nor the Superior Court suggested that granite satyrs have any rights which are not subject to suspension in an emergency. In fact, as we've already seen, the court adopted a case which stated that even fundamental rights such as the right of travel and free speech may be suspended." Unquote. So I had some thoughts on this, as I often do, on many things. You know, the Constitution, both the state and federal constitutions, were kind of not protecting us anyway. What protects us, regardless of what the politicians agreed to in the past, or what they swore an oath to, what they wrote down, that actually isn't what's important. What's important is the amount of pushback that you can manage when they do something that is an act of aggression. And of course, the type of pushback matters a lot too. If you push back violently, it usually just makes the government's case for them, even if your violence is not an act of aggression, even if it's just retaliation or defense. But if you can commandeer the headlines with neutral coverage or even negative coverage about your pushback, generally you can give the government pause. Now, since most of us can't generate headlines without going to a great deal of effort per headline, there are other options. You can at least generate a small amount of publicity. You can write a letter to the editor. You can call talk radio. And I think ultimately it's sort of it's through the free speech and the ability to get that free speech actually heard by somebody or large numbers of somebody's. That's where that's the path we take to secure and stand up for most of our freedoms. And maybe voting the bastards out, submitting laws or repealing laws or whatnot, the legislative process. Those are paths that can work too. certainly the New Hampshire State House is a powerful avenue for getting attention for concern about the way the government is behaving. When you make a law that outlaws something they're doing that they like to do, then they can't help but have to take that seriously, and it tends to get press. And of course, in New Hampshire, it's very easy to get in stuff in front of the legislature. I would have done it many times if it weren't for the fact that I'm a little bit reluctant to trigger taxpayer expense. Each of these bills, costs something to hear and get voted down, as most of my bills probably would. Anyhow, so more about this author, Ian Hewitt. I mean, it looks like it, or maybe it's Hyatt. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. But it says he is the, quote, General Counsel and Director of Policy at Cornerstone, a Christian advocacy group in New Hampshire, unquote. An interesting letter to the editor appeared in the Concord Monitor on January 14th. I mean, this is who claims to have written the letter, but you probably shouldn't assume that the person named as the author really wrote this, because I'm not sure anyone would actually really write this in the United States and put their name on it. But I'll tell you what it says. Concord Monitor letter to the editor, quote, "Re-education camps are going to be necessary. The only way the minds of those poisoned by Donald Trump and Fox News can be reset to the true, clear, correct path will be to round them all up, maybe set them to work at some simple, useful labor while they are subjected to an intense re-education in truth, justice, and the American way." Unquote. And it says that it was written by Peter Davis in Laconia. But I'm not sure okay, they can say that if they want. I hope they verified that really was who wrote it. I don't know that it was. January 16th article. It looks like it's from Reuters. Reads, quote, authorities... It's from it's dateline Concord. Quote, authorities discovered an AR-15 rifle loaded with armor-piercing bullets, an armored vest stuffed with several loaded magazines, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition when they searched the home of an Amherst man charged with threatening members of Congress. Also in the article it says, quote, earlier this week, I guess his name is Ryder Vinegar, or Weiniger, I don't know how he pronounces it. It says, quote, earlier this week, Weiniger was charged with leaving threats on the voicemail of 6 unidentified members of Congress. Weiniger allegedly made the threats in mid-December. They included racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic taunts. And Weiniger warned the Congress members to get behind President Trump or they would be hanged. Unquote. Okay, so ultimately, what bothered me here was the article. So what are these racist, homophobic, and who says they're racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic? Why can't we hear them, right? I mean, maybe they are, but the article doesn't include any of the quotes. The only closest it comes is to saying that it had it said something about them being hanged. Okay, well, what exactly did he say? Unquote, quote unquote, please. Guy's been was initially held without bail. So if you don't have exact quotes from the feds, you can say that the feds did not provide exact quotes, right? Shouldn't that be an issue? It's just like an article that is like, no, so and so's a racist. Like that's like what the article basically says, and it doesn't back it up. Okay, looking at this article closer, actually it looks like this is a Union Leader article, not a Reuters article. It has Reuters, there's Reuters contributing to it, possibly just through a photo. The article was updated later, February 4th, quite a bit later, and I'm still not seeing text of what these actual statements were. if you're going to accuse somebody of something like this, where's the exact wording? Or, you know, if the threats were, sorry, I lost train of thought there, during a break. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, if they don't know what the quotes were, they can at least pass on the federal government's opinion, right? That the statements were homophobic or racist or whatnot. The federal government says the statements were homophobic. Well, don't just take their word for it that it was homophobic. And if they saw the statements, and then why didn't they show us the quotes? One thing the article is good about, though, is it does make clear that the threats were not issued after the January 6th incidents at the Capitol. It makes clear that they were issued before that, and it also makes clear that a U.S. attorney is saying, quote, his taunts took on a very different and real meaning in light of the actions last week, unquote. Attorney Charles Rombo, I guess, is his name. So what? The fact that something happened after he made the threats, should he be considered, should he be blamed for that when the threats were not public? It sounds a little bit like guilt by association. Obviously, if he'd made a threat and someone heard it and went and carried it out, then that's different. So eventually they did another article. This looks like February 4th, updated February 5th. Well, they do go ahead and quote his statements related to Trump. There's nothing in here about his allegedly racist statements. His quote about Trump was this. He said, quote, Donald Trump is your president. If you don't get behind him, we're going to hang you until you die, unquote. Capitol Police. All right. So, you know, if he really said that, then, you know, that sounds fairly serious. Could be a source of concern. But, you know, they just throw out the racist part without backing it up. I'm not seeing any other union leader articles about this issue. I don't know. Come on, union leader. You're better than this.
LRN.FM. 24 hours of Liberty Radio every day. Now available on satellite, too, at sat.lrn.fm. That's what a satellite sounds like. Put it on your unlicensed station. Wear it in your hair. But above all, don't despair. The Liberty message is getting out. And right now, you're missing it. Or maybe you're not. But skip on over to LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.